Spoilers for like the first few hours of Witcher 3, and also sort of everything that came before that. White Orchard might be my favorite area in The Witcher 3. This opening level strikes the perfect tone and presents its quests in such harmony with each other that what might otherwise have been a forgettable tutorial area turned into its own great accomplishment in environmental storytelling, as well as an encapsulation of a great strength of all things Witcher. Lore explanation time. White Orchard was part of the Kingdom of Temeria, a country in the north of the game's world where our protagonist Geralt spent 95% of the first game and then a whole nother game trying to figure out who killed its king and why. The second game ends with all of the northern kingdoms being invaded from the south by the expansionist Nilfgaard Empire, and Temeria lasts all of a few days before being completely overwhelmed. At the start of The Witcher 3, the war has continued far north up to the border of another country, Redania, but that's far away from White Orchard, which is now under full-blown Nilfgaardian occupation. Geralt arrives here with only secondary concern for the war. He's chasing his lover Yennefer, who he knows was in the area around when the Nilfgaard invasion came through, and has to rub shoulders with both the locals and occupying Nilfgaardians in order to figure out where Yennefer went. Who rules Temeria, or whether it even gets to exist, was a central question of both the previous games, and now is a feature of the world Geralt has to do other stuff in. But that doesn't mean it's unimportant. The way the consequences of Temeria's conquest hang over White Orchard is exceptionally subtle for video games. The old state is completely gone, a foreign power rules, most people have lost multiple loved ones and live under a regime that is very liberal with capital punishment. It would make sense to lean into this. Rain clouds, dark ominous music playing, poverty visible everywhere. But that's not what the game does. White Orchard aesthetically is excessively idyllic. It looks like a fairy tale dreamland, like Hobbiton or something. You know bad things have happened, but the art direction is pushing back in the opposite direction. And the music comes in with this violin piece that borders on hopeful. There's something alive there waiting to come up, but there's also something weighing on it. Mourning, unease, and wariness just below the happy surface. In the main village, a child is hopping around singing a rhyme about the Nilfgaardian Emperor. If you don't pay attention or don't stick around long enough, it appears to be a sign of prosperity. Kids are literally playing in the street. Great, happy town. But if you do pay attention and stick around long enough, you hear his dad yell at him and tell him he's not allowed to hang out with the other child that taught it to him, for fear they'll all be executed for this small infraction. There is suffering here, and though the sun will rise again tomorrow and look just as beautiful, it is not symbolic of White Orchard's prosperity, but that life must go on, whatever traumas, abuses, and losses its inhabitants sustain. The pain is not all Nilfgaardian in origin, however. The old lord of White Orchard was also kind of a knob. The one monster contract in the area has you fighting a wraith haunting a small collection of houses. Geralt learns that the spirit was a woman who fled town with her husband to live on the outskirts and escape that same ruler. Unfortunately, he followed the couple out there with his men and murdered them both. Later, you can learn that the village herbalist was her friend and that apparently she'd said something to insult the lord.
Word is Claire said something about the lord's son, Florian. Something that made the Lord furious.
You also learn from a hunter that he was the former lover of the Lord's son, who later committed suicide when their affair was found out. Most of the side quests in the area complicate just laying the blame on Nilfgaard for everyone's suffering. There's a dude who asks you to recover some stuff from a cart he claims was attacked by monsters, but you find arrows on the corpses and you chase him down over it, and it turns out he's a Temerian Secret Service officer who killed the transport because the medicine would have helped the Nilfgaardians and he wanted it for himself. Good for the North, but also he murdered people giving medical aid. There's a dwarf who had its forge burned down in a sort of hate crime, and the Nilfgaardians care about giving him justice. The commander of the local Nilfgaardian garrison is a former farmer who asks that peasants in the area only give what they can spare. A man wants you to help him find his brother who fought for Temeria, and reveals he cut off his own fingers as to not be forcibly conscripted by his own army too. What is being shown is not a utopia disrupted, but the dispatch of one bad reality for a different bad reality. And yeah, I'm definitely not saying the Nilfgaardians aren't bad. They caused that guy to need the medical supplies in the first place, they hang a dude for vandalism, and when the peasant gives over his grain with worms in it, the captain has him fucking lashed. They're a settler colonialist power. Nothing's absolving them of blame. The quest with the brother missing a few fingers leaves the message I'm choosing to absorb. You search for his brother on the battlefield and eventually find him in a shack with a Nilfgaardian soldier. Turns out the brother was mortally wounded and the Nilfgaardian dragged him to safety. The two have just been spending days shooting the shit while the area was completely conquered, chosen to focus on their shared humanity rather than the flag of the army they were forced to join. The books put conspicuously little effort into differentiating between the northern kingdoms and the people that rule them. Foltest of Temeria gets the most focus, but it's still almost entirely from a short story where you learn he had an incestuous relationship with his sister. There are multiple NPCs in White Orchard that get more development than Demavent was ever given in the books. I really like how the show has done this too, where despite adding extra depth to other characters from the books, they've made the monarchs barely tertiary characters. And I think from there you can get to the heart of a lot of what makes The Witcher so great as a property. Its focus on the people caught in the wake of war and destruction, people who care about their children, their loved ones, their friends, more than who is king, but just happen to find themselves in a time and place where they are forced to care. In The Lord of the Rings, the fight against Mordor is the plot. In Game of Thrones, who controls Westeros is baked right into the title. The Witcher is about a dude who wants to save his adopted daughter, and a lot of powerful people who happen to want her as well. Sure, both those other stories have plenty of human moments, and Witcher has plenty of big ones in the books, shows, and the games, but I think there's an outsized commitment to care about the people whose lives are determined by those who are often the protagonists of other stories. White Orchard shows a willingness to prioritize that commitment that's even unprecedented for the series. The first game starts with a siege of the Winter stronghold of Kaer Morhen in like the first 3 minutes. The second game has an even bigger siege with Ballista, a literal dragon, and the death of a king. Hey, sir, this man borrowed my frying pan and I would like it back. But really, I do think White Orchard is the best attention getter. Witcher 1's scene is so linear and boring that it's probably most people's only experience with the game because they bounced right off it. Witcher 2's is worlds better, but it still keeps you on rails and feels closer to an action game than the RPG that will come after. White Orchard, by not even trying to be that type of spectacle, actually winds up being a much more invigorating opening because it gets you excited for what you will actually be doing in the game, making connections with real people stuck in this messed up world. Thanks for watching. Most of the audio up to this point is actually from a couple years ago. I'm trying to release something new every Friday, but the project I was originally going to do for this week took a little longer than I'd expected, and I found this one completed enough that it was pretty easy to get it done by the end of the week. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you again next Friday.